In the first lecture, we looked at the U.S.'s place in the world based on largely facts. In this lecture, we're going to look at the U.S.'s place in the world based on ideology and the perceptions of U.S. foreign policy, not just from our perspective here in the United States, but from other perspectives around the world. So let's begin with how the U.S. views itself. If we look at any nation state around the world, each of them is going to have sort of its own unique personality and its own unique style and way of doing things. And this is a nation state's national style, the expression of cultural influences that have historically shaped a country's identity and approach to international relations. Well, the U.S.'s national style is said to be defined by national exceptionalism. According to the author of your textbook, this is a widely held sense of national distinctiveness or superiority. Well, in the first lecture, we talked about that superiority in numbers, military dominance, economic dominance. But this is more of a feeling rather than fact. This is more of a sense of ourselves as being good, high, better, so on and so forth. And if we look at the definition for this word exceptionalism, it can fit those facts that we talked about in section 1. The United States is rare because of its military and economic place. It's an exception to the rule of other nation states. But that's not what national style gets to, and that's not what an American exceptionalism gets to. Here, these other parts of the definition, superiority, right? A sense of superiority. This is what national style, and particularly American exceptionalism, looks at. So, what makes the U.S. exceptional? Well, here are some facts, right? We are rare. We are an exception to the rule. How is the U.S. different than other nation states? Well, we have those facts from Lecture 1, a dominant economy, a dominant military, an influential culture. Other influences come from our history. We were one of the few nation states that was not completely destroyed by World War II. That is, other major nation states were, and the U.S. wasn't. We have a relatively large population, well over 300 million people. We have a large geographic area. We're safely surrounded by 2 oceans. That keeps us away from harm in part. We are one of the largest, if not the largest, food producer in the world. We have historically had one of the largest industrial capacities, and today we have the greatest technological advancement in the world too, much of which comes from Silicon Valley. But typically, when you hear this word American exceptionalism, those facts aren't what people are talking about. They're talking about the ideology of exceptionalism. And these have historical roots, political roots, cultural roots, many of which can be seen throughout our nation's long history. One part of this ideology is that perhaps we're God's chosen nation. On a subsequent slide, we're going to look at the City Upon a Hill speech by John Winthrop, one of the Massachusetts Bay founders, that was given in 1630. There, we get this notion of being God's chosen nation. Well, if we're God's chosen nation, then perhaps we have a special mission in the world. The special mission that we have: spreading democracy, spreading the idea of rights, standing up for what is good or we think is good versus evil. one of the problems with this is that some say that this leads to an apocalyptic view of the world. That is, if the world is based in this idea of good versus evil, us versus them, how far are we willing to go? What must we do in order to triumph? If someone else is evil, shouldn't they be destroyed? If someone else is evil, are they out to destroy us? We see then that American ideology based in exceptionalism can lead to some challenges or problems for our nation state's foreign policy. So here are a couple of visual representations of American exceptionalism by ideology. Why are we superior? Well, just because we're America, or as the cartoon says there, America. Here in America, we're better than you, and we know it. That's exceptionalism by ideology. This sense of superiority, not always based in fact, but a sense of moral goodness, a sense of standing up for what is right, fighting the evils in the world, that this is America's mission. This is how exceptionalism shapes our foreign policy. And we have a long history of this belief, and it goes all the way back, according to many scholars, to the City Upon a Hill speech by Massachusetts Bay founder, or at least one of the founders, John Winthrop, 1630. And I'm going to read an excerpt from this speech where we get this language, City Upon a Hill. And I quote, "Our community, as members of the same body, so shall we keep the unity of spirit in the bond of peace. The Lord will be our God, and delight to dwell among us as his own people, and will command a blessing upon us in all our ways, so that we shall see much more of his wisdom, power, goodness, and truth than formerly we have been acquainted with. We shall find that the God of Israel is among us, and when 10 of us shall be able to resist 1,000 of our enemies, when he shall make us praise and glory, that men shall say succeeding plantations, the Lord make it like New England, for we must consider that we shall be a city upon a hill. The eyes of all the people are upon us." What consequences does this sense of superiority, this sense of being perhaps God's chosen nation state, have on our foreign policy? Well, that we should stand for what is good, we should fight for what is evil, no matter the consequences and no matter the circumstances. And according to scholars, this leads to the United States to act alone. This is what unilateralism means. That we may act alone in the world when others are not with us, as long as we are standing up for what is right against what is wrong, we will be successful. Perhaps also this leads to a sense of morality and judging others by our own standards. Nation-state behavior can be judged by moral standards, and that American morality should provide a universal standard for the rest of the world. This is what we see in the United States foreign policy, is spreading human rights, spreading democracy, spreading the beliefs in the markets, that the American way perhaps is best for everybody else. Another instance of its influence is in legalism. Well, if the American way is what is best, then we ought to enforce it. And so, through international organizations, through international law, which have largely been built by the United States and its efforts, particularly if we look at the Bretton Woods organizations, we look at the United Nations, for example, that the United States should and has created a global system of institutions that will allow our beliefs, our practices, our views of what are right to be applied to everyone else in society and in the world. This is what our national style has led to. If we are exceptional, if we are as great as this idea of American exceptionalism leads us to believe, then we can't go wrong, and others should follow. Well, we have to come to the point of asking ourselves, is this belief in superiority and American exceptionalism good for us? Can it lead to problems? What problems might it lead to? One issue, or one set of problems, that it may lead to is an overestimation of our power and our ability. If you think about that John Winthrop speech, he says, 10 of us fighting against 1,000 of others. Well, if you have this sense of superiority about yourself, if you have this sense of morality, of good versus evil about yourself, then shouldn't you win? Shouldn't that morality triumph? That's not always the case. Others may be more powerful. They may have more troops or more money or more tricks up their sleeve. And some scholars argue that American exceptionalism, or this belief of superiority, has led the United States to engage in foreign policy that is risky, that overestimates our power, overestimates our ability, and in doing so, underestimates the power and ability of others. And so we may see the world in kind of a formulaic way. Good versus evil. Well, what if some nation states are good sometimes and they're evil in other instances? How do we treat them? Other problems it may lead to. That planning, unilaterally perhaps, will be made based on the assumption of success, not the assumptions of reality. Maybe there's a double standard in judging the behavior of countries around the world versus our own. When others imprison their population falsely, there may be an outcry from the United States, but if it happens here, well, then we just made an honest mistake. A sense of superiority may also lead to ambivalence towards diplomacy. Why engage with others and give them partially what they want when we are obviously, and even in the eyes of God, the superior nation state? And so moving away from diplomacy and towards force may be a consequence for our foreign policy. There are any other number of questions, concerns, problems that this may lead to for U.S. foreign policy, but these are just a few. We will more than likely mention more throughout the course.